All right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a good lunch break. We are back here at the afternoon session of the first day. In the interest of time, I will not introduce the speaker, can do this himself, but we are pleased to have Noah Bowen from the University of Lausanne with us to give us some insight on the impact of AI on creative capabilities. Noah, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was very happy to hear Daniel's presentation before. I think every panelist will now refer to Daniel's presentation, it seems. But for a while, he spoke about those research papers which are experiments and test a certain task, right? And then he based all his talk on the aggregate of all those papers. And so I want to present one such paper, but specifically one that focuses on creativity, which is something that hasn't been studied too much yet in the lab experiment framework. And so this is what we are going to present. There you go. So I want to start with this little doodle here. On the left, it's how and I think many people saw automation for the longest of time. That is robots or digitalization, which is able to do tasks that are very codifiable. And we've seen, or we thought that the advance of automation would be the ability to do more and more complex tasks, but which would still be very codifiable, and everything else would still be, human capabilities, and we would thrive there, and we would specialize there, and whatever is, repeatable, we would delegate. But what I find exciting about AI and what we've seen with generative AI in particular is that actually it's not being able to do more complex tasks. I mean, it can do it, but it's also doing other tasks that were thought to be only human, really, in nature. And such tasks could be being creative, like here, painting, or coming up with a novel, or brainstorming with new ideas. I don't know how you use ChatGPT. Personally, I use it also to brainstorm, and I think many people do this. And this is some sort of creative work which was not possible before. But now, if we go on OpenAI's website and we look at how they promote their model, this is a screenshot from 1 year ago. I'm sorry I didn't update it. It's still GPT-4, but it gives you an idea. Typically, they would show benchmarks, as it has already been said before. So what they do is that they take a well-known standardized exams, such as the bar exam, the LSAT, the GRE. I'm sure everyone here in this room has had to do at least one of those. And they compare the results of humans to their model, and then they claim, okay, our model is super intelligent, it can beat 90% of the humans at that very task, and we think that task is relevant, right? But there are no real creative, like open creative tasks here, and this is what we've done. So our paper is basically nothing more or nothing less than adding one more line to this benchmark with a creative task. We are not saying that we are having a creative task that can encapsulate all creativity, and they're not saying that it's all, intelligence is summarized by those 12 tasks, right? But it gives us an idea of what it can do. And so, why is it interesting to know what are the capabilities of AI, especially in the creative domain? So as we've said also before, it's key to identify tasks that are likely to be replaced completely or augmented. So can we find synergies between the human intelligence and the AI intelligence? Can we build something that's greater when you add those two way of thinking together? Or is it going to be just unaffected? And why is it interesting? Because it allows us to inform policymakers and workers to guide skill development. I mean, there are other reasons why it's important, but I think this is the main one. As a school or as a government, I want to know what to teach to the future generation of workers. Should I tell them that they should learn how to code really thoroughly, or should they learn how to prompt? Where should we invest time in education? And I think this sort of exercise that we're doing can help a little bit in this discussion. And something else which our setting allows is to study the adoption and human assessment of AI. So far we've said, okay, large language models or AI in general is capable of doing such thing, such thing, such thing. Incredible. But we haven't really talked about the reception of human to this new technology. Do we really incorporate it well in our day-to-day task, or are we do we fear it a little bit? Are we resistant to the integration? So we want to also say something about that. To make it clear, we have 3 research questions that we are going to tackle through this experiment. One is, can generative AI outperform humans in an open creative task? I'm going to be a bit more precise what we mean by open creative task. Does the access to AI enhances human creativity? So does working with one of those AI models increases human creativity? And also, how do human raters perceive or evaluate what has been generated by humans and by AI? Good. I've listed a few papers here. I think looking again at Daniel's presentation, I think 3/4 of the papers that are here are also in his presentation. So basically, we could see the literature into 3 strands, I would say. One is looking at, in the workplace, firms that have integrated ChatGPT generally in their day-to-day jobs and see who gained the most. And are there any gains? And typically, you'd see gain between 20 and 40% in productivity, and that, given the difficulty of the task, it is either the low-skilled workers or the high-skilled workers that benefit the most from having access to this new technology. And we are more into creativity and AI, and creativity, as you will see, it's a challenge because it's very subjective. And here we are going to have one view of creativity, but there are many views of creativity. So here, if you're not happy with ours, I suggest you read all of those papers, and you might find a better answer to the question I'm asking. But they're going to say something that are very similar to what we're doing. And also, this project started in 2023, and at the time, no one had wrote any papers there, but actually, there were many teams that were doing kind of the same things in parallel. So we kind of echo what they're doing here. And finally, I'm going to talk also about human perception of AI. So there is this concept of, what's the word? Where we discard advice from AI because we just don't trust it, and we underuse AI's abilities just because we are not really ready to use it yet. And so we're gonna see a bit about that. Good. So let me fix ideas first. What do we think about when we think about creativity? We use this definition by Margaret Bowden. It's very broad. We say the ability to create novel, useful, and original ideas. So novel meaning something we haven't seen before. Useful, so that it helps in some way or another. And original, something that we haven't, that seems smart, a bit association of ideas that we hadn't seen before, and that creates something that's original. Right. It still is very vague. So the way we're going to assess creativity in our experiment is by collecting a broad set of creative outputs. So we're going to ask many people to do the same task. That's a creative task. And then we're going to ask even more people to judge based on certain criteria. And then we say, okay, if a majority of the room here, or the people we surveyed, think that A is more creative than B, then we're going to say that A is more creative than B. So this is also how it's been done in the other papers. I think it's not very, it's a good way to do it, but there are others. Good. So let me tell you a bit more about the task we've chosen. Participants had to choose between 2 prompts. Imagine a town, city, society in the future, or if you had the talent to invent things just by thinking of them, what would you create? So participants came into our lab and could choose between one of those 2 prompts. They had 10 minutes to write a story that was as creative as possible, and I can tell you how they were incentivized. So 1,000 characters, it's a big paragraph, basically, in 10 minutes. And then we check how creative they were. We asked both ChatGPT and Bard. So in 2023, it was still Bard. It's Google's version of ChatGPT at the time. They each produced 200 responses for the prompts. And then we recruited slightly less than 1,300 US prolific participants, which we sorted into 3 groups. First one we called human baseline. That is, they were competing only against themselves. So about 400 humans, they were told to do the same task, and then if they were among the 10% most creative, they would receive an extra bonus. That's how they were incentivized. Then we had another group which we call Human Against AI, and it was aimed at mimicking what could happen in a firm where you would have both human and AI employees doing the same job and competing against one another. And there, they were informed that the 10 best % of text would be paid, but it's mixed. The panel is both human and AI. So we wanted to see if we induce some competition against the AI, we will see a difference in distribution of creativity. And finally, the human plus AI is the synergy one, where participants were encouraged to use an AI, either ChatGPT 3, 4, or BARD to generate the answers. And to give you a sense of the sort of answer we got, here I generated image based on the text that were produced, so it's AI doing an AI job again. Anyways, and so you see it's very much science fiction sort of description of a city, you know, underground or protected by bubbles and from the wind. So some were super creative actually, and some were pretty bad. But this is the sort of text they wrote, so science fiction-y sort of text. Good. Then in the second stage, we asked 3,300 extra participants to take the role of raters who would give their opinion on the text. And they were randomized into 3 more groups. The first group is baseline rater, where they would read 20 randomly drawn text and tell us if they think it was 0 out of 10. Is it creative? Is it original? Is it surprising? Or is it useful? So those 4 categories. Then the corrected raters did the same job, but this time we took all the responses that were produced by humans and we corrected for grammar, because what we feared was that human assessors, those who were judging the text, were judging the typos. They're going to say, hey, this is less well written, so we wanted to capture only creativity and not the form per se. So we just wanted to have the story that was judged and not the way it was written. We didn't change the structure of the sentences, we just corrected for grammar and typos. And then in the final treatment group, we informed participants that some texts were produced by AI and some were produced by humans. And we asked them to guess which text was produced by an AI and which text was produced by a human. Here's a small table summarizing some descriptive stats of the task. So what we find is that the AIs wrote smaller text in general than humans, and that humans plus AI, those who had access to AI, really wrote much longer texts. Like it's a big difference. And they took much less time. So those who were aided by the AI were more productive in the sense that they wrote more and in a fewer amount of time. All the other differences are non-statistically significant. Good. Any questions so far here? You can stop me at any time. I'm happy to answer anything. Yes?
Hi, I'm Samiksha. I'm from the research department. How did you make sure that the humans in one of these categories did not use AI?
Good question.
The other categories.
Yes. So we tried a few tricks. One was using one of those AI check software which detects whether a text was produced by AI or not. We used that as a robustness check, and it didn't change the results at all. I'm not super confident in those tools, but this is the best we had. And I think, as we will see, the treatment differences, they will speak for themselves. So if what you say is the case, then what we are providing is an understatement of the effect. But I think given the scope of the results, we shouldn't fear from that. Good, so let me give you straight away the distribution of creative scores by treatment groups. So the human baseline, you can see, it's fairly normally distributed with an average score of a bit above 5. Some were extremely creative, some were not so creative. Something you would expect, from asking this sort of task to humans. And then this is when we added the competition. We don't see much difference. There is a small difference I'm going to talk about a bit later, but in terms of distribution, it's more or less the same thing, right? So being in competition against AI didn't change the creativity of our workers. But then if we give them access to any AI, we see a shift towards the right. That means having access to the AI made them a bit more creative, right? It's significant. You can see it's a bit by model. There are 2 peaks. Actually, each peak depends on which model they use. So if they used ChatGPT-4, the gain in productivity was higher than if they used an older model, right? Or BARD, which was even worse. Then that's the distribution of BARD. And so BARD is really terrible. So BARD alone you shouldn't use it. I mean, now you cannot even access it anymore, but really no one should use it for this very task, actually. It's really bad. But now I'm curious in the room about a guess. So where do you think ChatGPT-4, so that was 2 years ago, where will it be along this distribution? Is it more than the human alone or less, you think? Who thinks it's more than the human alone? 1 person? 2? And who thinks it's better than human plus AI, the synergy? Okay, no one. Right, so this is the result we got. So in this very task, ChatGPT alone was extremely creative. And something also important to note, the variance was very narrow. So every output was kind of the same. But what really surprised us was that human plus AI together was beaten by the human alone. And we're going to kind of say something about it. Yes, please.
So to me, like the larger the variance, seems like the people are more creative, right? The variance very narrow means the ChatGPT tends to think the same, right? They have a central tendency, right?
Thank you for the question. I'm gonna get back to you with this because we have something to say about this. So keep your question. Thank you. Yes.
What role does time play in this context?
Mm-hmm.
So if I understood correctly, they have 10 minutes
Yes.
to complete this task. And how would it change if they had a week?
Yes, so we had one reviewer which asked that very question. So the distribution of time, what we see is that if you spend less than 3 minutes to do this task, you're just very, very bad. And so we excluded them from this analysis. But then if you spend more than 3 minutes, then time doesn't really matter in your performance. So then it's really gradual. So if you spend 5 or 7 minutes, you're going to see a very small increase in performance, but not very much.
I guess it's a bit philosophical, that question, to some extent, because I guess human creative processes, they tend to take time, no? So not 7 minutes, but maybe 7 days.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you could think of this task as, it's just one task. If you give humans 10 days to come up with a proper story, or even more, like if you ask to come up with a research proposal or something, which sometimes take us a year or something, then we might still be more creative. So this is, as I said, 1 line extra on so to give us an impression of what it can do in a small amount of time. But yeah, it's a really relevant question. Thank you. Good, so I'm not going to spend too much time in the regression tables, just to tell you the difference in size. So BARD was about 1 point less creative than the humans baseline, whereas ChatGPT was nearly 2 points more creative. Here, I said human against AI, this is something we pre-registered. We expected that when we introduced competition, female and male would react a bit differently, because this is something we've read again and again in the literature, and this is something we see again here. So as soon as we say there's going to be competition, then it seems it's a small effect, but significant. The female tend to be a bit less creative as soon as we say it's going to be a competition. Even if we say it's a competition against AI, right? Which is not a real human competitor, but still that seems to make a difference. But the difference it's quite small in terms of size. Yeah, and then it's robust if we add more controls. So if we add age, gender, and many more, it still stays the same. Now, if you remember this table from OpenAI about, I don't know, LSAT, typically LSAT students who take the test, it's not every random Joe in the street, which is what we have done here. It's people who prepared for the exam, right? So it seems a bit unfair to compare an AI that has been trained for this very task to a human that can be anyone. And so we were interested also in the best humans in our sample. Are the best humans really beaten by the AI or not? what we find is that if we consider the top 10% most creative answers in all of our texts we collected, the share of those texts that were produced by ChatGPT is very high. It's nearly 60%, whereas the share of those texts that were produced by humans is actually quite low. So even among the most creative texts we collected, we still see a dominance from ChatGPT. And that's true at 10, 5, and 1%. And this is an understatement because there were many more human-produced texts than there were AI-generated texts. So this is even an understatement. Now, if we look at the 5 most creative answers, then it was like 2 AI and 3 human, but they were very, very close in terms of quality. But if we zoom out a little bit, we see this sort of pattern. Good. So those are the 4 results from this small exercise. For this task, ChatGPT surpasses the representative human creativity. I repeat again for this very specific task. AI tools, they boost human creativity, but not to the ChatGPT 4 level only. Okay, there is this gender difference, and ChatGPT 4 creates the most creative response overall. So now let's go to the other side, which are the raters, right? And we wanted to see if there is a difference between the groups we randomizely set them in. So what we find is that if they rated grammarly corrected texts, we don't see any difference in scores. So they are judges, they really judge the story and not how it was written in the sense of typos and mistakes. They didn't penalize that. And then when we told them that there were texts that were written by AI and texts that were written by humans, at first glance it seems like it doesn't make any difference at all again. But if we dig a little bit more and we look at by guess, what we find is that, so if I guess the text was produced by an AI, I'm going to penalize it. And if I guess the same text was produced by a human, I'm going to bump up the grade. So there is some sort of defiance against texts that were generated by AI. And why does it not affect the result from before, from the previous table? This was because we are very bad at guessing the source of an AI, right? The source of a text, sorry. So if texts were produced by humans, our panel said 65% of the time that it was produced by a human. It's better than chance, but it's not amazing. When a text was produced by ChatGPT, also about 60% of the time they thought it was produced by an AI, which is the correct answer. But the funny thing is that when the text was of very bad quality, Bard was very bad quality, our panelists thought it was produced by a human. So that was kind of an interesting take out from this. But I think the most profound result here is that really we have defiance still towards content that we think is produced by an AI. And this is consistent with other papers where, if I show you an art piece and I tell you it's produced by not by a human but by a machine, you have a tendency to under-evaluate it. Good, so here are 3 more results. Grammar and typos, they don't affect creativity ratings too much. Raters cannot identify the correct source reliably. And they're biased against content believed to be AI-generated. Then we made 2 more exercises. Given that I have some time left, I'm going to speak a little bit about it, and given that you asked a question about it. So what we wanted to do is to read those texts properly. So not just look at the creativity rating and distribution, but rather see what makes them more creative, and also the sort of diversity in ideas that were produced. Because as you were saying, if I have an AI that always tells me the same idea, it might be a good idea, but once it's used, it's used. And then the next one has no value anymore, right? And so we wanted to ask, to see if we ask the same question 400 times, how many new ideas come up? And we compared to humans, because for humans we also have a lot of answer to the same question, and we looked at how many new ideas were produced. So what we did is we embedded those responses, and then we looked at how far away those texts were. So we kind of clustered responses by uniqueness. And what we find is that actually, well, BARD was super repetitive. It was kind of always the same idea. But for a more advanced model, such as ChatGPT-4, it had the same diversity in ideas compared to humans. And that's true for the whole panel of texts. But if we look at the best texts, if we restrict only to the top 10% there, more ideas, more unique ideas were produced by humans. So still here we have a bit of an edge because our most creative minds tend to not think alike and give diversity in ideas, whereas ChatGPT, I mean, it's diverse, but not as diverse. And then something that was alluded in an earlier presentation, we also played with the idea of having ChatGPT to rate the texts, right, and not humans. Because there's this idea that's, I heard a lot, but I never really saw any conclusive report on that, is that AI is very good at producing something, but not very good at judging its own production. And as such, it cannot go further, because to go further, you need to understand what you're producing. I don't know if you heard this line of thoughts before. So here I thought, okay, here it would show that it would just give random grades, basically, if it cannot understand the creative level of the text that it's judging. But actually what we find is that the correlation between the grade given by human and the grade given by the AI is very high. It's 72 correlation. And crucially, it keeps the same ranking across sources. So ChatGPT still thinks that he is himself producing the best texts, and then the human plus AI, the human and BARD alone. So I can say that LLMs can approximate human judgment, at least in this sense. I've got still some time, so I'm happy to talk about it. I'm just going to conclude. So, of course, this is, as I'm going to repeating myself again, but this is only one task, and it doesn't encapsulate all creative thinking, right? We didn't ask them to come up with a new Victor Hugo novel. It was a fairly simple task that everyone could do and didn't require so much training. And we asked everyone in the street, right? We didn't ask for specialists. Exactly, it says nothing about completely new ideas, because creativity can be coming up. My nephew can be creative when he draws something, but it doesn't mean that it's creative in the sense of for the humankind, right? It has been done before. For him, it's creative, right? It has done something that he has never done before, something he has never seen, put together ideas, but for the humankind, it might not be super novel. And we don't test that, right? We just say, okay, it's able to create something that's appear creative to us, but it doesn't mean that it's going to create the new groundbreaking ideas, right? So this we cannot say anything about. And I think it's very hard to say anything about that yet. And we focused on a US-based general population. It would be also quite interesting to go in a creative setting in a company and ask, I don't know, some people who do marketing to do this task again and see that. And one thing I want to add, which is surprising, and maybe that sparks some discussion, is that the human plus AI treatment, we saw a small gain, right? We didn't see a big gain. So it's like the human is slowing down the machine in our case, right? If you pair a human to the machine, the total output is going to be weaker. And we think it's because of prompting strategies. We said, when we did the experiment, we gave a very simple prompt to our to the models. We say, hey, be as creative as you can. Basically, we just said this. But we didn't know how our participants used the AI. We didn't ask them for the chat history. But we assumed that at the time, they didn't know how to use it properly. And so it would be very interesting to give them some training how to properly use the model, how to prompt correctly, and see what would be the result. Because here I'm sure we would find something that's quite interesting. And prompting, in a way, is maybe the new way of being creative, right? If you're creative in your prompts, you might get a more creative output. So then it's just, everyone is more creative, but still the most creative prompter becomes the most creative overall, right? That could be also something. Right? And so what's take home from this experiment? AI, I mean, this is no news now, but when we released that, it was really kind of a bit shocking. Significant promise in creativity when you see the difference in distribution. It's not just that it's better, but the difference in distribution was very big, and I think this is an important message in our paper. It has the benefit of really disrupting the creative sector for firms and individuals. So when we received the remark, okay, you didn't ask creative experts, you ask everyone. But actually, the creativity of everyone is an asset for a company. Even me, who I don't think I'm a particularly creative person, but if I go to the job market and I am 10% more creative, then I can still output something a bit better, I think. And so, still interesting to see that it can boost the productivity of everyone, or the creativity of everyone. There's this discrimination against AI that has been shown in many different settings. This is a new setting in which it's being shown, so I think this is quite cool to share. And it might be a problem when you think of integration of those new models. So even if we have a technology that's incredible, but we just don't want to use it, then it's going to slow us down in how much we're going to take better use of it, take advantage of it. Sorry. And then there's, at least in this experiment, there's a big room for improvement in the human-AI interaction, but I think this is general. With those new technologies, we should just teach people how to use it better, because it's kind of fell onto our head. We had access to it, but we never, trained into how to use it. And here, at least, there's a big potential into training to get better, the most out of it. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to continue the discussion. And if you're interested by the paper, you can find it here. And all right, cool. And Ernst is not here. Oh yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, this is really interesting research, which somehow goes beyond my intuition. Like when we think about using AI as a tool for daily work, basically we feel it doesn't really produce new knowledges, right? It just repeat or piecemeal things that others produce, and we human beings are proud of ourselves for being creative, and that is part that we believe cannot be easily substituted by AI. But now your research shows that we are not as even creative as AI. But you make an important distinguishment between creativity and innovation, right? So I was wondering if you can play that out a little bit more to show us what's the difference between, I really don't get innovation, what kind of tasks is being used. I mean, I came in a bit later, maybe I missed that part of the presentation, but what's the task in the experiment that you're using to test creativity, and how that differs from innovation, right?
Yes, so,
thank you.
So the task precisely was, we asked participants to write an essay, basically, a very short essay on kind of science fiction. They had to come up with a future city, or describe a city in the future, right? And so you can be very creative there. You can say, hey, I think people are going to live in underground, and there's going to be planes that fly with solar, and we're going to talk through, some said we're going to talk through echo chambers, or I don't know exactly. But you can go in many, many different directions. It doesn't mean that those are ideas we've never seen before, but putting them together and eliciting some creativity, you could still think, okay, this is super creative. But this is not innovation in a sense that those are not ideas that has never been seen before. As I made the distinction, so if you, in the literature, if you think literature like, essays, those are, if you wouldn't buy those, right, for your pleasure, for your own pleasure. You would think it's creative, but you wouldn't buy those for your own pleasure. You would buy maybe a book from an author that has a track record of writing something that's totally new, or coming up with new ideas. Here, this task was not designed to measure this. It was designed to measure the creativity of individuals, but not the ability to come up with completely groundbreaking new technology. Now, it doesn't mean that AI, generative AI, cannot do it, right? Because my understanding technically of generative AI is that it reads a ton of text that we produced, and it doesn't necessarily patchworks it into new ideas. It understands the way we write and what is considered an interesting idea, and then comes up with something that is similar in line, but not necessarily the same ideas. It's not copy-paste. It's kind of deeper understanding of language. And so it doesn't mean that it cannot do it. It's just that our task doesn't measure that. Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry, I had to step out for a moment, but I wanted to build up on the on this discussion that you just had, because I think that this is, I mean, especially on the creativity issue, this is a key point that that is not probably fully formalized in much of the literature. So one of the things I mean I tend to think about is the when you make this distinction between ergodic and non-ergodic processes. You're probably familiar, I mean, just for maybe for the audience as well, an ergodic process is when the time average and the cross-sectional averages are the same. Or you can, if for those who are a bit more econometrically interested, you can approximate it with stationarity versus non-stationary processes. And so when you think about AI or generative AI, because it's based on a particular statistical domain, whatever generative AI produce, in principle, if it's a one shot at least, it will only be a recombination of existing data points. Whereas if you want to have a non-ergodic process, where the real innovation comes in, you need to have some kind of cumulative processes. And so the question then is, I would agree with you that in principle there's nothing that speaks against the idea that generative AI can potentially also be non-ergodic, because that's, I mean, in a sense, our brain is not necessarily that much different in terms of how it functions. But the question is then, how do we need to implement these processes? Maybe in a combination. I mean, you showed us results that suggest that actually combining human and AI doesn't necessarily produce the massive improvements. But maybe then there are some ways of combining humans and AI in a way that we can really get these massive breakthroughs, that kind of new disciplines, completely new ideas, completely outside the distributional spectrum of the data that this was trained on.
Yeah, I think I would give the same answer as you gave to yourself, which is a human interaction with those AIs will make us maybe more faster. We can try more ideas and not necessarily being stuck into one idea, and being able to come up with ideas ourselves and then try to come back and forth and improve it. So as a tool to improve our ability to come up with really groundbreaking new ideas, I think it's very valuable. I don't know if I don't think I come up with new ideas often, but personally, I like to discuss with those AIs of my ideas and say, hey, what do you think of it? Do you think it's worth going in that direction? Where would you go? And I think this process is quite enriching in the sense that I can go faster. I don't need to talk to 10 of my colleagues. And it still gives me an insight. I mean, I'm very happy to talk to 10 of my colleagues. They're going to give me a different insight. But this is a new perspective, which is very exciting. And I think this, I mean, I'm speaking out of my mind, not out of the research I've just done, but I think this is something promising in terms of ergodic production. There's a question online. So, Alina, can you?
Yeah, hello, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I wonder if you try to explore the mechanisms behind the creativity process. And specifically, you might be aware about the so-called creativity paradox. So this is basically, it describes the situation when people, or individuals, they are less creative because they rely on their previous knowledge. Right, so basically the idea is that you can create new ideas by combining other ideas that are already there, that are not new. So for instance, you have the concept of creativity, And then you have the concept of destruction. You combine both and you have creative destruction. It's a new concept that has very new properties, new aspects, right? And so the idea is that you can only create new combinations of the knowledge that you already know, right? And so in this sense, the results that you gain are not very surprising to me, because AI has access to more knowledge than humans, than an average human. So what I found surprising, though, is that a human plus AI combination is worse than AI. So this is kind of bad news for the creative industries. So, because humans are supposed to be the ones to pick the creative ideas. So this was very surprising to me. I don't know if you have any explanation for that. How is it possible?
Yeah, no, we didn't. I mean, it was also very surprising. It was the most surprising result to us, because we really expected that the combination of a human plus AI, two different ways of coming up with ideas, would race to the top and come up with something that we haven't seen before. But no, I don't know exactly why. So we tried to look into those texts, reading them and seeing, why are they not as good as what the AI produces, and we couldn't find a singular reason. And so I don't know exactly how to answer you there. Just that it is surprising. Maybe if we asked creative people who are used to come up with new ideas, maybe we would see something else. But on this population, at least, we didn't see anything.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? So I want to discuss this. First, I think this is really important research, but it seems like you mentioned about this is just on one simple task, right? About testing the creativity. So I was thinking about the role of creativity in governance. So I might use another word like imagination. So today we face a lot of uncertainties, right? So we need imagination or creativities to vision different future scenarios. But if we use human expert or ChatGPT to predicting of with a vision in different future scenarios. So my concern was that since ChatGPT or any other large language models mathematically, they follow one distribution or a series of distributions. That means their imagination or creativity is bounded mathematically, but human minds possibly not bounded. But your result shows that ChatGPT actually have more diverse answers for at least for these tasks. So that gives me some motivation, maybe to explore maybe policy issues or like climate change, whether ChatGPT or other large language models can have a diverse range of scenarios, right? But do you think that's possible? Yeah.
I mean, from the research I've done, I can only tell you the result I gave you, but I find it super exciting that it's able to not be just a parrot saying the same sentence again and again, but it can explore different paths. And I think we should leverage that, and people don't leverage that enough when you use those those tools. We are happy with the first result, and we can maybe iterate on that first result, but we should really emphasize the fact that it can give us many paths, and we should explore those paths because it can do it for free and at speed, at scale. Now, how are those paths going to be something that we haven't thought of before, really? This I cannot tell you, but it's still very interesting to know that it can do a variety of ideas on the same task. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, I think we have to move on. Thank you very much, Noah. Thanks to your co-authors as well. All right, our next presentation will be by Dr. Shen Ziyang on exposure to large language models and college major choices.
Everything okay with the presentation? Let me just go to yeah. And let me just share from Zoom. Yeah, no problem. Almost there. Voila. Okay. I think we're good to go.
Can I close it? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for still being here and having me here in this workshop. My name is Yang Chen. I'm an assistant professor from the Department of Labor Economics in the School of Labor and Human Resources in Renmin University of China. And my research fields are behavioral and experimental economics. Today, I'm very honored to share with you one of my current research. This is a joint work with Yazhen Gong, also from Renmin University of China, and Juanjuan Meng and Yaxun Zhao from Peking University. And our title is Exposure to Large Language Models and College Major and Career Choices. It is a field experiment. So to start with, so this is a motivation question. Please guess what event happened on November the 30th, 2022. If you have enough creativity, then you may have the answer that it is related to our topic today. Well, this day was the birthday of ChatGPT. It was publicly released on that day. So almost 3 years has passed, and we want to ask a question about its public release, that how do disruptive technologies shape education and career choices? To answer this question, we conducted a field experiment in the summer of 2023. So remember that the GPT was released in the winter of 2022. So our study focused on the first cohort of high school students who were choosing the college majors in large language model era. So we are trying to focus on the right people in our study. Specifically, our research questions are, first, are students aware of large language models? And second, how do they respond to that? Why this is a crucial question? Well, I believe it is what we are interested in, no matter what fields we are. For example, from the perspective of economics, then it is related to the topics of human capital investment and uncertainty, and the labor market mismatch and unemployment. And for management, then it is related to workforce adaptability and planning, and organizational strategies for reskilling and talent planning. And also for sociology, then it is related to more general questions like inequality access to information and technology, and also social stratification in education and career opportunities. So here is a slide on our brief review of our experimental design. So in an experiment, there will be some randomization, and we applied a between subject design, which means each subject will only enter one condition in our experiment. And we have two groups, the treatment and control. And as an information intervention, we provide additional information on large language models to the student in the treatment group, but do not provide information to students in the control group. We care about two types of key outcomes. The first is their college major choices, and the second is careers. For college measures, we have two waves of surveys. In the first survey, we collect their preferences for college majors, and in the second wave, we collected their actual admission result. However, for careers, we only have preference because the actual outcomes will take a very long time. Okay, here is a slide on our result from our two waves of surveys. For wave 1, our overall treatment effect is quite simple. We just find that treated students will choose less risky college majors and careers. This is not interesting at all, but I think the implication is quite crucial because it means that overall high school students are not fully aware of the potential shocks of large language models. So this will have very strong policy implication. And the second, for channel, we find that treated students will focus less on personal interest in the measure, but more on salary and job stability. So you can see a shift from non-monetary incentives to monetary incentives because of additional information. And in the heterogeneity analysis, we find that students with higher cognitive ability and higher socioeconomic status will perform smaller treatment effects. So the implication is that students who have some advantage in their endowment, no matter in their IQ or in their family background, will have kind of smaller information gap. However, the students who have already at a disadvantages will need more information, so they need more assistance. And in the second wave, the overall treatment effect is consistent with wave 1. We find that treated students were admitted to less risky college measures, so their actual outcomes are consistent with their preferences. However, we do find some deviation from preferences to outcomes from wave 1 to wave 2, and we have an interesting explanation for that. We find that parents are heavily engaged in this decision-making process, so paternalism can predict the scale of deviation from wave 1 to wave 2. Okay, the related literature on economics are three branches. The first branch is about technology shocks and the labor market adjustment. In this branch of literature, researchers mainly focus on different waves of technology shocks like automation, computerization, machine learning, and large language models. And our contribution is that, as far as we know, we are the first paper which causally study how awareness of large language model may affect college major and career choices. And the second branch of literature is about the determinant of college major and career choices. There are many interesting explanations for that, and there's abundance of papers discussing earnings expectations, which means that sometimes we make suboptimal choices because we don't have an accurate information about potential earnings for different occupations. And our contribution for this topic is that we expand this literature to technology-driven expectations about future labor market. And the third branch of literature is on inequality in access to information and how to overcome information barriers. We provide a novel evidence on in equal awareness about large language models and its consequence on labor market. Okay, so that is the main message in our study, and let's go for more details. Let's start with more background about my research. We have talked a lot about large language models today. I just want to explain something additionally, in that the power of large language model is because that it can generalize to different prompts. So that means large language models can finish some tasks that do not exist in the training data. So that is why it is very likely to replace many positions. And if we think about the past automation and today's generative AI, then they are quite different. We have talked a lot about this topic today, but what I want to emphasize is that the role of education, especially higher education, are quite different for today compared to the past. Because in the past, education was like a shield from automation. As long as you have a college degree, then you are safe from being replaced by the machines in the factories. However, it is no longer the case nowadays, because education itself cannot guarantee protection from being replaced. Instead, you need to think about what measures you are in and what occupations you are in. So that is why we want to focus on college major choice under this topic. And if we talk about college major choice, then I must provide you with more background information on China's National College Entrance Exam. It is also called Gaokao in Chinese. This is a very large-scale exam which happened at the same time nationwide from June the 7th to 10th each year, and its coverage is very wide. Almost all high school students must take this exam to enter colleges in China, and the admission rule is quite straightforward. It is just based on your exam score and ranked preferences for majors and choices. However, on the other side, the college does not have much sense of control over the result. They cannot pick students by other features apart from the exam score. So the placement was only determined by the exam scores and the students' preferences. So that is why it's important to focus on the responses on the student side. And one additional detail is that although this is a nationwide exam, in the admission process, it is a provincial system. So we can consider each province as an independent market. Okay, then from a perspective of demand and supply, then we can see that on the supply side, the college provide the quotas, and this quotas is quite fixed in the short run, so they cannot quickly adjust to any exogenous sudden shocks. However, on the demand side, students are very flexible. They can do whatever they want. So supply is rigid and demand is flexible. So it is very necessary to understand the demand side reaction, because it is how the higher education system absorb exogenous shocks. Okay, now let's go for more details about the experimental design. First of all, why experiment? The simple answer is that we try to find some causality in addition to correlation to give more direct policy. And here is our detailed procedure. The exam took place in the June of 2023. Then all students take the exam. And by the time of the exam, they don't know they will participate in any research. And in 1 month later, in July of 2023, then they began to receive the information about their exam scores. And at this point, we randomize students into control and treatment groups. We provide some information to students in the treatment group, which I will show you on the next slide. And students from both groups will take some surveys on preferences for college majors and careers, and also about something about their demographic information. The sample size was about 1,500 in wave 1 survey. And 1 month later, students began to receive their admission result, so we collect this information in the second wave of survey. There were some attrition from wave 1 to wave 2, but luckily the sample was still balanced in the second wave. But the sample size was smaller. We have only about 400 students. Here is what we provide to the student in our research. The data comes from this paper, which have appeared a couple of times this morning. It is by Taina Ilono et al. The title is GPTs are GPTs, Labor Market Impact. By the time of our study in 2023, this was a working paper which was not published, but it was one of the most recognized paper which predict the potential risks of different occupations. So we take the data from their paper, and we map their predictions to China's 20 industries and related college majors, and show them in a figure like this. To make the figure more readable, we give them different colors from red to yellow to green. And in the following data analysis, we will categorize them into 3 types to give us more simple interpretations. If you are interested, then the most likely to be replaced industries were IT, finance, and research. Although workers in these industries always have very high pay, but if you are just a freshman in these industries, then your positions are very likely to be replaced. I believe all you understand. However, the least likely to be replaced industries were construction, accommodation, and agriculture. This is not because that these industries are promising. It is only because that they are not quite related to what GPTs are good at. So this is the result from this paper and what we show to the subjects. And the key outcomes we care about are preferences in wave 1 and real outcomes in wave 2. And in wave 1, we have both college major preferences and career preferences. But in wave 2, we only have college major. Here are some more details about our randomized unit. We choose to randomize at a class level because of many complex reasons, but I think I don't have time to go over this. But we just randomized students by class level to control both the spillover effect of the information and also try to balance the sample of 2 groups. And